Ndị be anyị ekenekwanụ m unu. Anyị sị ka ọ mara na anyị na mma n'Eke, anyị sị ka ọ mara anyị mma n'Orie, anyị sịkwa ka ọ mara anyị mma n'Afọ, ka ọ makwara na anyị mma na Nkwọ, anyị sị ka nke onye chiri ya zerụkwa. Ebe anyị si were wetara unu ya bụ ozi n'ụbọchị nke taa bụ Easter News 24. Ya bụ ozi bụ gbasara maka ya bụ ife na-eme na obodo anyị nọ n'ime ya adịnwere ụwa na-azọ n'ala Igbo. Ozi a bụ according to the Biafran activist wetara ya n'iru akwụkwọ n'ụbọchị nke taa. As he quotes, breaking news: UN analysis expert unveils a leaked plan USA allies back Nigerians break up as Biafrans celebrate. Hear the news in details. Alright, ya bụ ozi bụ according to the Biafran activist wetara ya n'iru akwụkwọ n'ụbọchị nke taa. Can I turn to ya bụ ozi ka ọha n'uju? Over to you, sir.
The calls to split Nigeria aren't just internet chatter anymore. We are talking about Africa's biggest nation here. And in November 2025, when Donald Trump threatened military action against Nigeria, something wild happened. Gunther Fallenga, this guy chairs NATO committee. He starts making these public remarks about partitioning Nigeria. For millions of people watching, this wasn't just some fringe talk anymore. This was mainstream geopolitics. The giant of Africa might actually split apart. And here's what will blow your mind. Some Nigerians are actually starting to think division might be the only way out of this mess. It starts in the Middle Belt, where churches are being burnt, villages destroyed, hundreds of Christians killed in attacks the government can't or won't stop. This isn't just another humanitarian crisis. This shows the Nigerian state is fundamentally broken. We have captured millions of militants walking free, intelligence agencies that know who sponsors terror but won't act, a justice system that treats people differently based on where they come from and what they pray to. And the government's response: they are not fixing security. They are not reforming anything. They are just telling people to be patriotic, calling critics unpatriotic. But if you are a Southern Christian or living in the Middle Belt watching your community get slaughtered, unity speeches don't mean much when you are burying your dead. People feel completely abandoned by the institutions that should protect them. Then Donald Trump steps in with threats of military intervention and sanctions. Some Nigerians, and I mean exhausted, desperate people, they see foreign pressure as maybe the only thing that will make their government care. Others say this is dangerous, that it will destroy sovereignty and make things worse. But the fact they are even having this debate, that tells you how broken Nigerian society has become. So we are diving into three big questions. How did partition talk go from internet forums to diplomatic discussions? What failures made Nigerians willing to consider foreign intervention? And what happens to Africa if its largest nation falls apart? Stay with me. We are breaking down a moment that could reshape an entire continent. Let's get into it. November 1st, 2025. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, doesn't just threaten military action, because within hours, international figures start openly discussing something way more radical: splitting Nigeria into a Christian South and Muslim North. Gunther Fallenga, he is suggesting partition might solve Nigeria's security crisis. Suddenly, we have hashtags like Balkanize Nigeria trending right alongside defend Nigeria's sovereignty. Because for years, breaking up Nigeria was academic talk, opposition whispers, separatist fantasy that mainstream politics dismissed. But November 2025, everything has changed, because international figures with real institutional power, they are now openly discussing partitioning Nigeria publicly. Major media gives it serious coverage. Nigerian diaspora communities engage the debate openly. The whole dynamic has basically shifted. But here's what makes this moment huge. It's not just foreigners talking about Nigeria's breakup. Significant numbers of Nigerians aren't automatically rejecting it anymore. Social media is full of exhausted Southern Christians, Middle Belt communities, people saying the federal system has failed them. You see comments like, maybe Two countries is the only way to peace, and the government abandoned us. Why stay united? Now, these are the kind of narratives that completely flipped the whole game. It went from Nigeria will never split to what if Nigeria can't stay together? This isn't just talk, because when international actors openly discuss partitioning a nation, when citizens publicly debate breakup scenarios, when official channels can't convincingly defend unity, something is already broken underneath. Look at history. Yugoslavia in the 90s, Sudan before it split, Libya before intervention. Former division usually follows when enough influential people stop defending what exists. Now, Donald Trump, he frames this latest threat as humanitarian intervention. But the broader conversation is something else. Some external observers don't see Nigeria's partition as a catastrophe to prevent anymore. They see it as an outcome to maybe manage or even help along. But before asking if Nigeria should split, we need to understand why a nation of 230 million people, a continental powerhouse with massive resources, youth, and history, would even consider breaking apart. The answer is in institutions that have lost all credibility, governance that has failed millions, and a system that looks broken beyond repair to those suffering the most. Now, let's look at the state of the Nigerian military. For us to understand the context of all of these security issues, let's look at the state of the Nigerian military. Soldiers keep expressing frustration about their anti-terrorism mission. Academic research in African Affairs Journal documented this complaint through extensive interviews. Soldiers describe suspicions about terror sponsors. They believe some military and political elites benefit from keeping the conflict going. They allege intelligence leaks that sabotage operations. Now, these allegations are serious and they keep coming. Multiple sources, frontline troops, retired generals interviewed by researchers, they all claim captured militants rarely get prosecuted. Court records show hundreds detained, but barely any of them convicted. Cases they store forever. Suspects vanish from custody. Then it happens again. A 2021 academic study found Nigerian soldiers believe the war is being deliberately prolonged because it's a money-making machine for political and military elites. Now, whether that is true or just frustration talking, it shows catastrophic moral problems in the armed forces. Intelligence agencies, they face the same accusations. The DSS, the DIA, the NIA, they supposedly have extensive intel on terror networks and sponsors, but public prosecutions of high-level sponsors almost never happens. Now, this has created widespread perception, documented in media reports and civil society statements, that powerful interests get protected from accountability. Now, what makes people even angrier is how the military responds to attacks. Multiple documented cases from 2025 show attacks happening near military installations, but response times are slow or intervention fails to stop the massacres. Communities ask why security forces didn't act on intelligence warnings. They get no real answers. One retired general told researchers anonymously, "The military knows who the sponsors are. We have files, documents, intelligence, but naming them would expose how deep this goes." But whether that's completely accurate or partly perception, hearing this from inside the security establishment reveals institutional rot. The most devastating part, soldiers' morale completely collapsed. Research shows that when you ask soldiers why they keep fighting, many don't mention patriotism anymore. They mention economic necessity. One soldier told researchers, "I fight because I have no other job. I have a family to feed." Patriotism became survival. Duty became a trap. Service became a sentence. But institutional failure goes beyond the military. The entire justice system, police, the courts, high political offices, they are accused of applying law unequally based on religion, region, ethnicity. Now, the evidence for these claims is documented, disturbing, and you can't even begin to deny it. Now, let's take a critical look at the current state of Nigeria's justice system. Now, let me bring an example from March 2025, when Nigeria's Supreme Court that shocks the nation. Sunday Jackson, farmer from Adamawa State, gets sentenced to death by hanging. His crime? Killing a herdsman who attacked him with a knife on his own farmland. The facts are in court records. Back in 2015, when Jackson was tending his farm, a herdsman cattle destroy his crops. Jackson confronts the situation. Now, the herdsman attacks him with a knife. Jackson injured, but disarms the attacker, and in the struggle, he fatally wounds him. But by any reasonable standard, that is self-defense. But Jackson gets arrested and charged with culpable homicide. He waits years for trial. February 2021, Adamawa State High Court sentences him to death. They rule he should have fled instead of defending himself. Court of Appeal upholds it. March 7, 2025, the Supreme Court of Nigeria confirms the sentence, death by hanging. Now, constitutional lawyer Mike Ozokome calls the verdict a miscarriage of justice. He says the Supreme Court was unrealistic to determine Jackson should have fled after subduing his attacker. The Christian Association of Nigeria condemns it. Human rights organizations document the case as emblematic of systematic injustice. Now, meanwhile, documented evidence shows a completely different pattern elsewhere. Operation Safe Corridor, launched back in 2016, has rehabilitated over 1,000 former Boko Haram fighters. The program involves the radicalization, vocational training, and reintegration, including into the Nigerian military itself, although the military is consistently denying these claims. Now, as of February 2025, about 789 individuals remain in rehabilitation, with over 2,000 total processed since the program started. The contrast is stark and documented. A farmer who killed in self-defense gets death sentence. Former terrorists who voluntarily join insurgent groups get rehabilitation and reintegration. The Nigerian public sees this disparity and draws conclusions about which lives the state values and which it throws away. Now, U.S. Senator Ted Cruz responds by introducing legislations targeting Nigerian officials allegedly complicit in persecution. His bill specifically names judges, governors, security officials because the disparities become too obvious to ignore. But for Nigerian Christians watching these patterns, international intervention isn't interference anymore. It feels like the only remaining hope for justice. And the failure go deeper, because while the justice system fragments along regional lines, state institutions appear to be aligning with divisive ideologies instead of defending constitutional secularism. What happens next will define whether Nigeria can remain a unified secular democracy. Now, let's take a critical look at the current state of Nigeria as a sovereign nation. Nigeria's constitution says it's a secular state, no state religion, equal protection for all faiths, separation of religion and government. But in practice, this constitutional ideal faces serious challenges. President Tinubu's Muslim presidential ticket back in 2023 sparked intense controversy. In a nation roughly split between Christians and Muslims, running a same-faith ticket was unprecedented in democratic Nigeria. Electoral data documents the backlash. Over 80% of northern Christians voted against the APC. The party lost traditional Middle Belt strongholds. Christian associations issued formal warnings that the ticket violated the spirit of secular governance. The government defended it as being about competence and not religion. But for many Christians, especially in violence-affected regions, the symbolism was devastating. It signaled their representation in the highest office doesn't matter anymore. Documented patterns in high-level appointments reinforce perceptions of religious imbalance. Now, analysis of cabinet positions, security appointments, agency leadership shows what critics call northern Muslim overrepresentation relative to population distribution. Whether it's intentional policy or coincidental outcome, the perception of favoritism became political reality. Northern political leaders make public statements that some interpret as endorsing Islamic governance principles. Now, this ranges from calls for stricter Sharia implementation in northern states to suggestion that Islamic values should guide national policy. Now, context matters because many of these statements happen in northern Muslim majority constituencies where this rhetoric works electorally, like it works in their favor when they make this type of rhetoric when election comes. But when it gets amplified nationally, it fuels certain Christian fears of creeping Islamization. Now, for many Nigerians, this isn't theoretical debate about religious representation. It feels existential. If the government openly tilts towards one faith, how can it claim to protect all citizens equally? If secular constitutional principles bend to political expediency, what stops further erosion? Western observers start describing Nigeria as a failing secular state. Even UN human rights mechanisms take notice. African scholars warn that erosion of secular governance in Africa's largest democracy could set dangerous precedents across the continent. The symbolic messaging was unmistakable. The state appears to be choosing sides, and if the state chooses sides, then citizens must choose too. That reality led to the next devastating development. Proposal that would have seemed unthinkable just years earlier. Some political leaders start publicly suggesting that former terrorists, after repentance, could hold high political office. When those proposals gain traction, even patriotic Nigerians start asking, why would anyone fight for this country? Now, if you want to understand how deep the North-South Christian-Muslim divide runs deep in Nigeria, if you want to know how far it goes, you need to look at the treatment of Boko Haram terrorists that are captured or the ones that supposedly surrendered versus how the victims are being treated. I will give you an example from what happened in 2016. Back in 2016, the Nigerian government launches Operation Safe Corridor with a supposedly noble purpose: rehabilitate low-risk Boko Haram defectors and reintegrate them into the society. The program is designed around 5 components: disarmament, demobilization, de-radicalization, rehabilitation, and reintegration. So by February 2025, Operation Safe Corridor has processed over 2,000 former Boko Haram fighters. About 789 remain in active rehabilitation at facilities in Gombe and Zamfara State. Now, the program includes psychological counseling, religious reorientation, vocational training, civic education. Now, the graduates get certificates and some get integrated into security forces. On paper, this looks like a sophisticated counter-terrorism policy. The radicalization programs exist in many countries facing extremism. Academic research even shows purely military approaches to insurgency often fail without complementary efforts to address root causes and provide exit pathways for fighters. But in practice, Operation Safe Corridor sparked a lot of anger among Nigerian citizens, especially in communities that suffered Boko Haram attacks. Now, frontline soldiers, the Nigerian military, some soldiers feel betrayed because academic research documented their reactions to these rehabilitation programs. Men who fought Boko Haram come home to find former insurgents being integrated into the same military. Some soldiers request transfers. Others just stop believing in the mission. The psychological impact was catastrophic, and it is still catastrophic because survivors of Boko Haram attacks, they even expressed deeper anger. Communities that lost family members, churches, schools, livelihoods, they watch former attackers receive rehabilitation, vocational training, reintegration support. Meanwhile, survivors get minimal compensation or assistance. The contrast with cases like Sunday Jackson's becomes unbearable. A farmer who killed one attacker in self-defense gets death sentence. Boko Haram fighters who participated in massacres, they get rehabilitation and second chances. The disparity is well documented, visible, and to affected communities, it's like a slap to their faces. Now, some northern governors, they make this provocative public statement about amnesty programs, suggesting repentant Boko Haram fighters could reintegrate fully into society. Now, why not explicitly saying terrorists could become president? The language used talking about full reintegration and second chances without limit alarms many Nigerians who feel these policies reward violence. Now, the social contract is breaking. If the state appears to reward killers and punish defenders, why would citizens defend it? If patriotism means accepting your family's murderers as neighbors, would you choose patriotism? Immigration data from 2024 to 2025 shows spike in Nigerians seeking to leave. Brain drain accelerates. Young professionals increasingly see their future outside Nigeria because the country is losing its best and brightest, not just to economic migration, but to despair about justice and governance. Across Nigeria today, this feeling is taking hold on almost every young person you see. The system is not broken. The system is designed this way. And maybe the only solution is to stop participating in the system entirely. That's when Trump's threat lands. And instead of uniting Nigeria, it does something that reveals just how deep the crisis has become. Now, when a foreign president threatens military action against your own country, history says citizens, they rally around their flag. External threat creates internal unity. But Nigeria in November 2025, it defied that pattern. Because when Donald Trump issued his November 1st ultimatum, Nigeria's social media doesn't unite in outrage, it fractures, because millions of Nigerians, particularly from southern and middle belt regions, they express sentiment ranging from cautious support to desperate hope that external pressure might force government accountability. Now go to Nigeria's social media space. It is well documented. We see posts that has documented this extraordinary moment. You will see something like, maybe foreign pressure will do what internal protests cannot. And if Trump can force our leaders to act, then I support it. These are the kind of things you will see on Nigerian social media space right now, because our government fears international embarrassment more than local suffering. Now, this represents complete erosion of state legitimacy. Citizens aren't just unhappy with government. They have stopped believing government can reform itself. They have stopped trusting national institutions. They have stopped seeing value in patriotic appeals. The government response makes things even worse because Tinubu's administration, when he calls for unity, yes, he's calling for unity because officials are appealing to Nigerians to be patriotic. They warn against siding with foreigners, but for millions of Nigerians, especially Southern Christians and Middle Belt communities, the appeals, they ring like, it's like music to their ear. It doesn't connect with the ordinary or the everyday Nigerian. Now, the questions are, unity around what? A system that appears to exclude us while defend leaders who fail to protect us. Now, the questions, they keep coming. Nigerians are asking, unite around what? A system that appears to exclude us. Why should anyone defend leaders who fail to protect Nigerians in the first place? Now, documented grievances include the Muslim ticket perceived as exclusionary, the alleged northern dominance in security and economic appointments, perceived marginalization of southern and middle belt regions in federal resource allocation and power distribution. Now, among all of these are the things that Nigerians are not happy with, also including persistent insecurity in Christian majority areas with inadequate government response. Now, the irony is not lost on Nigerians. The ruling APC, while in opposition before the 2015, they actively courted Western criticism against President Goodluck Jonathan's government. These same APC leaders that are ruling Nigeria today, they traveled to Washington, London, European capitals, and advocated for pressure on the former president, Goodluck Jonathan. Now they are in power. The same party condemns citizens for welcoming external accountability pressure. A prominent analyst observes and he says, the government wants Nigerians to be patriotic, but patriotism requires the state to earn loyalty. This government has earned contempt instead. According to this analyst, the Nigerian government has earned contempt. It has earned a lot of anger instead, because for many Southerners, supporting Trump's pressure isn't betrayal of Nigeria. It's response to leaders who betrayed Nigeria in the first place. If Tinubu can't protect us, one widely shared social media post states, then maybe international pressure will force him to. But as Trump's threat reverberates and partition talk spread beyond the normal rumor circle, a deeper question emerges. What would Nigeria's collapse mean for the rest of Africa? Hypothetically speaking, if Nigeria fractures, the impact won't stop at Nigerian borders. 300 million people live within 1,000 kilometers of Nigeria. Millions depend on Nigerian trade, Nigerian oil, Nigerian stability. A collapsed Nigeria doesn't just mean Nigerian chaos. It doesn't just stop in Nigeria. It means regional refugee crisis, economic collapse across West Africa, and the unraveling of regional integration that took decades to build. Now let's face facts. I know whenever I call Nigeria the giant of Africa, a lot of people take offense, but facts, they are stubborn. Nigeria is Africa's anchor, the real pillar of Africa, the continent's largest economy, most populous nation, backbone of ECOWAS, the economic community of West African states. Nigeria accounts for about 2/3 of West Africa's GDP. Remove Nigeria from that equation, the entire regional economic architecture, it crumbles. Benue State, the epicenter of these recent violence attacks, is Nigeria's food basket. It produces agricultural output that feeds not just Nigeria but regional neighbors. If violence and displacement destroy Benue State agricultural capacity, food insecurity spread across West Africa. If Nigeria fragments, conservative estimates suggest 50 million people could become refugees or internally displaced. Cameroon, Niger Republic, Chad, Benin Republic, all of these countries will face overwhelming humanitarian crisis. The Lake Chad Basin, already strained by climate change and Boko Haram, would collapse entirely. ECOWAS has proven unable to manage far smaller crises. When Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger experienced coups back in between 2020 and 2023, ECOWAS imposed sanctions but couldn't restore constitutional order. All three eventually withdrew from ECOWAS to form their own alliance of Sahel states. If Nigeria collapses, ECOWAS becomes irrelevant. I can guarantee you that 100%. The African Union faces similar institutional paralysis because the AU has even proven unable to prevent state collapse, even when warning signs are obvious. If Nigeria breaks apart, the continental body can't manage the fallout, and that creates the real danger. External powers rushing to fill the vacuum. China is watching. Russia is watching. They see instability and opportunity. They see strategic positioning possible. They see influence purchasable. Historical precedents are terrifying. Let's look at Yugoslavia's breakup that killed about 100,000 people and created a decade of Balkan wars. Sudan's partition left both halves of the country entangled in civil war. Libya's fragmentation created a proxy war zone for every regional and global power. These aren't abstract lessons. These are recent devastating examples of what happens when states collapse and external powers compete for control. Some African intellectuals argue maybe colonial borders deserve redrawing. Maybe artificial nations like Nigeria, created by British colonialism without regard for ethnic, religious, or cultural boundaries, they can't work. Maybe partition is inevitable. But these arguments, they ignore material reality. Partition in the modern era doesn't happen peacefully. Partition happens through war, displacement, and humanitarian catastrophe on unimaginable scales. Nigeria stands at a crossroads. The world is watching. The continent is holding its breath, and millions of Nigerians ask the question that will define the next decade. Is our country worth saving? Can it be reformed? Or is the current arrangement simply unsustainable? These aren't rhetorical questions. The answers will shape Africa's 21st century. They will determine whether African states can reform and strengthen, or whether the post-colonial state system will fracture under its own contradictions and under its own weight and corruptions. Now, if you have watched to this point, this is Frontline Africa, where we talk about geopolitics from Africa's own point of view. Now, these are the issues. These are the kind of things that has been burning, that has been going viral in Nigeria's social media space ever since Donald Trump dropped this bombshell on Nigeria. So the question is, even though these external actors that are talking about the balkanization of Nigeria don't have the power to make it happen, but it is fueling this conversation about Nigeria becoming like another Yugoslavia, about Nigeria becoming like another Sudan. But here is the issue with Nigeria. Should Nigeria collapse, it's not going to divide into 2 equal halves. It's not even going to be 3 or 4. It's going to balkanize into at least 6 or 7 countries. Like, it will be a total balkanization should it happen. It's not going to stop by just... So these are dangerous conversations. I feel like Nigeria is stronger together. Nigeria is stronger with their strength and their might together. But this is only my opinion. So, go to...
Ebumana ege ntị. Edaluli na-enukwu si wee na-anụ m ụbọchị nke taa na Eastern News 24 bụ ebe anyị si were wetara ya bụ nnukwu ozi gbasara maka ya bụ ife na-emenụ. Ka efi were ikwu gbasara maka ya bụ ife ndị anyị wetara n'ụbọchị nke taa n'iru akwụkwọ.